Aileen Wuornos is one of the most chilling and complicated figures in U.S. true crime. A drifter who lived along the highways of Florida and between late 1990 and the shot 7 men. Her name became shorthand for the female serial killer, yet her own story is inseparable from abandonment, violence, and a survival instinct sharpened on the edges of society. Born Aileen Carol Pittman on February 29, 1956, in Rochester, Michigan, she never met her father, Leo Dale Pittman, who was imprisoned for child sex offenses and later died by suicide. Her teenage mother, Diane, left Aileen and her brother in the care of their grandparents, Lori and Britta Wuornos, who adopted them. Accounts of her childhood describe alcoholism in the home, alleged abuse by her grandfather, and early sexual exploitation. By her mid-teens, she was homeless, living in the woods near her town and trading sex for food and cigarettes. In adulthood, she drifted south, hitchhiking to Florida and supporting herself. With sex work on and off the interstates, she carried a small caliber pistol and often stole to get by. In Daytona Beach in 1986, she met hotel maid Tyra Moore. The relationship became the most important bond of her life. The pair bounced between rooms and short-term rentals, living on Aileen's earnings and whatever she could take from clients. The killing trail began with Richard Mallory, Clearwater Electronics shop owner, whose body was found in December 1989, shot multiple times. Over the next months, more bodies surfaced near highways or in remote scrub. David Spears, Charles Carskadden, Peter Seams, whose body was never found, Troy Burris, Charles Dick Humphreys, and Walter Antonio. Wuornos claimed each man tried to rape her and that she shot in self-defense. Investigators pointed to patterns: multiple gunshots, stolen cars, and belongings that suggested robbery and escalation rather than sudden defensive force. Police attention focused when witnesses described a tough, blonde hitchhiker seen with victims, and when abandoned victim vehicles turned up with prints and pawn slips tied to a woman using aliases. Meanwhile, Aileen and Tyra tried to keep moving, pawning items and using victim cars until they were too conspicuous to keep. The mythology of the highway huntress grew in local headlines, but the reality on the ground was messy. A chronically traumatized woman in survival mode, leaving behind ballistic matches and fingerprints as the circle closed in. Her break came in early January 1991. Detectives tracked Wuornos to a Port Orange biker bar with an ominous name, The Last Resort, and took her in on an outstanding warrant. They then turned to Tyra Moore, who agreed to cooperate. Over a series of recorded phone calls, Moore urged Aileen to do the right thing. Within days, Wuornos began giving statements admitting to the killings, still insisting on self-defense. Prosecutors filed cases one by one, starting with Richard Mallory. Florida's rules allowed collateral crime evidence, so jurors in the first trial heard about the other homicides too. Wuornos' defense argued she was a lifelong victim who snapped when attacked. The state emphasized consistency in the shootings, theft of vehicles and property, and post-crime behavior. Mallory's own record, a prior conviction for sexual violence, complicated the moral picture, but did not change the verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder, death sentence. Over the next months, she received 5 more death sentences in other cases. Through the 1990s, she cycled between appeal hearings, competency evaluations, and media visits. Interviews oscillated between flat affect and bursts of fury. Psychologists noted severe personality pathology. Supporters framed her as a woman shaped by relentless abuse. Critics saw calculated violence wrapped in a victim narrative. What remained undisputed were the bodies, the ballistic matches, the pawn slips, and the taped calls that drew her confession. In 2001, Wuornos said she wanted the process over and moved to end further appeals. On October 9, 2002, at Florida State Prison, the state executed her by lethal injection. Her last words were surreal and infamous. "I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back, like Independence Day with Jesus, big mothership and all." She had declined a special last meal, taking only a cup of coffee. She was 46. Afterward, her ashes were scattered under a Michigan tree by a childhood friend. Filmmakers and authors kept the story alive, most prominently Monster 2003, which won Charlize Theron an Academy Award for playing Wuornos with unnerving empathy. Documentaries like Nick Broomfield's Aileen, Life and Death of a Serial Killer, probed her state of mind and the ethics of the spectacle that built up around her. Bars near Daytona still trade on the legend. The Last Resort displays a kind of shrine, a reminder that true crime often hardens into roadside folklore. So who was Aileen Wuornos? Predator or product of pain? The record supports both readings. The forensics and theft suggest calculated, repeated, lethal violence. Her history, abandonment, alleged abuse, homelessness, maps onto a profile of chronic trauma and hypervigilance that can distort threat perception. She insisted to the end that she shot to save herself. The courts and most observers saw something colder, a pattern of armed robberies wrapped in the language of survival. More than 2 decades after her death, her case still sparks arguments about gender and violence, media sensationalism, and how societies fail damaged children long before they become dangerous adults. If you're telling her story to an audience, remember its uneasy duality. The highways of Florida were hunting grounds, but they were also where a lifelong outcast believed she had learned the only way to stay alive.